Have you ever wished your database could just, I don't know, take care of itself? Well, today we're diving into a powerful tool that pretty much does exactly that. We're talking about SQL Triggers. Think of them as an automated guardian for your data. Always on watch, always ready to act. So let's see how they pull it off.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with what triggers actually are, then we'll see how to build one. After that, we'll explore some real-world uses, and finally cover a few crucial things you really need to watch out for.
So first up, let's really lean into this idea of triggers as the ultimate security guards for our database. They're all about automating actions to keep our data safe, sound, and consistent.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if your database didn't need you to babysit it, to manually check every single change that comes through? What if it could enforce its own rules all on its own? Well, that is the fundamental promise of a SQL trigger.
So what is a SQL trigger, really? Well, technically, it's a stored procedure, but it's got this one incredible superpower. It runs automatically. It's not something you call. It just sits there quietly, waiting for something specific to happen, like an insert, an update, or a delete. And the second that event occurs, boom, it springs to life and does its job.
You know, to really get a handle on this, the best way to think about it is like a high-tech security alarm system. But instead of protecting your house, it's standing guard over something way more valuable, your data.
Let's just break that analogy down. In your house, the event is a door opening, right? In your database, that's an insert statement adding new data. The alarm itself sounding off, that's our trigger firing its procedure. And the result? The security company's log gets an update, which is exactly like our database's audit table getting a new row. See? It's a perfect one-to-one, totally automated response.
Okay, now with these alarms, timing is absolutely everything. They don't all go off at the exact same moment. And this brings us to the two main types you'll encounter: before triggers and after triggers. Understanding the difference is critical. So, a before trigger, it's like a bouncer at a club. It checks the data's ID before it's allowed into the table. It can validate an email format, make sure a number is in the right range, you name it. If the data doesn't make the cut, it gets turned away at the door. Simple as that. Now, an after trigger is more like a diligent clerk in the back room. Once the sale is complete and the data is safely in the table, then the trigger gets to work, lodging the change in a ledger or maybe updating the inventory count in a separate table. All right, so we know what they are and we know when they run. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get a little more practical. Let's take a look at how you actually build one of these automated responses yourself. You know, building a trigger really isn't as intimidating as it might sound. You can just break it down into 3 easy steps. First, you name it. Give it a clear, descriptive name like after insert order. Second, you time it. You tell it which table to watch, in this case the orders table, and exactly when to fire, which is after insert. And finally, step 3, you define it. This is where you write the actual logic, the thing you want it to do.
And here's what that looks like all put together. We create our trigger, point it at the orders table, tell it to run after insert, and then define our action. Now, the really cool part here is that special inserted table. It's a temporary table that magically holds the brand new data from the insert. That makes it super easy to just grab that new data and copy it right into our audit log. It's clean, it's simple, and it's totally automatic. Okay, so that's the how. But the bigger question is why? Why would you even do this? Well, let's talk about where triggers really shine out in the real world, because this is where you start to see their true power. Probably one of the most important uses for a trigger is to create a rock-solid audit trail. Imagine you're running an e-commerce site. You need a perfect, unchangeable record of every single order that comes through. A trigger is the perfect tool for this because it guarantees that log entry is created every single time without fail. And for things like financial compliance and accountability, that's not just nice to have, it's absolutely essential. So when you put it all together, triggers basically give you three incredible superpowers. First, they enforce data integrity by making sure your business rules are followed automatically. Second, they automate all those tedious little tasks, like logging changes or updating related tables. And third, as we just saw, they're the absolute best way to maintain those critical audit trails, giving you a reliable history of everything that's ever changed. But, and this is a big but, it's not all just seamless, perfect automation. Triggers are incredibly powerful, which means you have to handle them with care. There are a couple of major pitfalls that you absolutely need to know about.
The first big risk is performance. Think about it. Every single insert, update, or delete on a table has to wait for its trigger to finish running. If your trigger is doing some heavy lifting on a really busy table, you can create a massive traffic jam. The key here is to keep your trigger logic incredibly lean and fast. Get in, do one quick job, and get out.
Now, the second risk is a little sneakier. It's called recursion. Imagine a trigger on table A makes an update to table B. Okay, fine. But what if table B has its own trigger that, when it fires, makes an update back to table A? You see the problem? You've just created an infinite loop that can grind your entire database to a halt. This is why careful, deliberate design is so important. So, after all that, when you step back and look at the big picture, what's the ultimate role of a trigger? I think the absolute best metaphor is to think of it like a conductor's baton. I mean, that really captures the elegance of it, doesn't it? Your database is this complex symphony of data, constantly in motion. And triggers, well, they're the conductors, making sure every single event is met with the perfect, harmonious, and completely automated response. Ultimately, that's what triggers are all about. They are your silent, automated guardians. They work tirelessly behind the scenes, enforcing your rules, keeping meticulous records, and maintaining order, all without you ever having to lift a finger. And that really just leaves us with one final question. Now that you understand the power of these automated conductors, what process in your own world could be streamlined? What automated response will you orchestrate next?